YouTube, what the crap's going on? Heir of Slaanesh here, and I am back with some hot, scandalous action. Well, how do you know it's going to be hot and scandalous? Well, because Slaanesh is present, and we got the White Dwarf. So everything is not only hot, but white hot because of the presence of Grombrindal. And not only that, it gets better. That's right, there's more, folks. I've got across from me on the battlefield none other than Indie Pride from Milk and Cookies Total War, so you are definitely in for a special treat today. I appreciate him playing some battles with me over the weekend, so that you all have some more to watch. I decided to do some Slaanesh versus Dawi matchup, and this is one where I feel like Slaanesh certainly has a lot of tools to hurt the Dawi pretty bad, but the Dawi also have some things that make life a little more miserable for Slaanesh. I'm not exactly sure how this one shakes out in terms of if it's always in the hands of two professional players of equal skill. I can't make that kind of analysis, but what we will do is we'll watch this battle, and we'll analyze what happens as it goes through. Now, immediately I'm going to start an attack on Indy with multiple units of Chaos Furies of Slaanesh. These have armor piercing, and I'm hoping that they'll do some nice damage. Since all of the dwarf skirmishers are armored, this will also tie up his slayers and basically his entire back line for a period of time, and my hope is that I can crush the front line and begin my flanking cleanly while he has to deal with an absolute mob of furies. And so far, so good. The things are working out fairly well. However, Grombrindal is doing a lot better than I thought he would here up against a pack of angry demonettes. However, they have gotten a little damage done to him. Now, I've got a couple of Seeker Chariots looking for targets. I was a little bit slow here on some of my Seekers, but they will be coming in soon. I certainly could have used them here already, as there are a lot of targets to get into, but I'll certainly make good use of them. Here they come. So my Furies do a little less damage than I expected, but not too bad. This Thunderer unit took heavy damage, and these units did get bogged down for a long time, making it where they couldn't fire. However, the existence of blasting charges was actually a very nice touch by Indie Pride, and I say that because Slaanesh's one weakness in this matchup, in my opinion, is their lack of armor. They just don't have much of it. And blasting charges, even from the cheap units, like Miners, are quite effective against low armor. And then from the Iron Drakes, which there's two of, by the way, they're actually very effective. So I like the pick of blasting charges. It gives Indie Pride a nice way to deal a lot of damage back into my units that, if I were an armored faction, would not be near as viable. So it is one way to try and play one of Slaanesh's weaknesses back against it, even though I would say that for the most part, Slaanesh has a lot of strengths in this match. Another weakness here is going to be Slayers. Slayers are an interesting one that are going to come up against Slaanesh because, I mean, almost unless I throw a Marauder into them, they're going to just get fantastic value, and they may even do fine against Marauders. Like a Demonette into a Slayer, they're just going to kill the crap out of each other, and that's probably a better deal for the Slayers than it is for you, because then your Demonette can't chew through the armor. And then on top of that, the Slayers are still going to be good against large, being able to help slow down chariots and other stuff. So, and the Dragonback Slayers are here, by the way, as well. And so see, like right here, where my Demonette gets into the Slayers, it takes a lot of damage because of that lack of armor. So I think Slayers, I think the blasting charges, interesting picks. Grombrindal is also an interesting pick for the dwarves. Now if you look, I am doing tons of damage to the Dawi, and I even have most of their units gone, and I've driven off a lot of their units, and now I'm able to start cycle charging my Seekers in and out here. And I mean, we're getting something done. It's not too bad at the moment, though my Seeker Chariots are starting to go, and my Lord got stuck here for just a few moments and started taking a great deal of damage to Grombrindal, so that was also not good. Another thing I noticed in this matchup was that the Chariots are not really dealing damage to the infantry entities, the single entities, although they are dealing quite a lot of damage to the dwarf infantry, so it's strange. There's something with the mechanics that's just kind of odd about what's going on. I'm using whatever magic I can. I'm trying to clean up all the dwarf units, hoping that maybe I can shoot through their leadership. This Norgrimling's Iron Breakers is making life very miserable for me. You see it has a lot of kills. And I'm starting to run out of chaff. And I knew that this was possible, but I honestly expected Slaanesh to be able to roll through a Dawi army fairly easy. And I think that, again, the main reason why I'm having problems cutting through Indie Pride is because I think he made some rather smart choices here. Those blasting charges, the slayers, those were really solid choices, and it's paying off dividends here. Maybe it doesn't mean that a better built Slaanesh army on someone's part couldn't still get the trick done. It might very well. And maybe the mistake that I made here, for instance, was taking my Furies and attacking his backline. Maybe I should have just used him to attack the front line to block that, because then his Thunders and stuff, you know, they probably wouldn't have done quite as much damage as the Thunders wouldn't have done quite as much as the blasting charges all across the front. So that may have been the ticket too, is to bring the Furies indeed, but use them to swoop down on anything carrying blasting charges before they were to swoop down on something else. And then, of course, you could simply pull them out and switch their target. That would also draw the attention of the Slayers all the way up to the front line, and potentially leave the back open to charges of Seekers. And if they don't come up to the front line, then you've got an armor-piercing attack coming from the rear of the blasting charge armies. Now, again, I'm not 100% certain if it would even KO these units. Certainly, Iron Breakers would be very difficult to actually KO that way because they're very tough. Miners with blasting charge probably knock out pretty quickly and efficiently in that manner. The Iron Breakers, though, you're probably still going to be left with some tough ones. To me, this is an interesting matchup. It's been a very tough fight for me here, much tougher than I thought. I actually expected, honestly, to kind of just roll through this. And I hadn't given as much consideration to those blasting charges. Once I saw them, I certainly knew they were a danger, but I was like, I don't know, with all these chariots and stuff, I should be able to roll through. Should be able to get the job done. But again, was a little bit surprised. The damage that comes off of the Exalted Seeker Chariot and the Chariots, again, pretty decent versus infantry. Pretty awful against single entities, and it's making me wish that I would have just spent my money on more Seekers. I feel like the Seekers would have just had a better overall effect here. But we'll take a look afterwards and just take a peek at the damage. Remember that the Seekers came into combat much later. I do have some units coming back from routing. I'm going to try and put it all together, see if we can possibly finish this one, though it's going to be very difficult because Grombrindal's still got a fair bit of health left. But, you know, never give up. Keep fighting. I'm going to try and pull this down to the end. I'm going to basically freeze Grombrindal back here. I use Phantasmagoria to hold him. He's obviously unbreakable, so the leadership won't matter, but it was more or less me trying to keep Grombrindal out of this fight for a moment. And it worked, but unfortunately, again, the Chariots are just not doing very much damage to this Runesmith. So we're struggling to get a lot of hits in, and then my infantry is rolling back from the back of the map. It's still very far away. Now, I could just swing around there and try and gather all together, but he's also got Iron Breakers and other units coming back, and this is going to make things challenging for me. It will not be easy. I went ahead and used Acquiescence. I was going to try and pull some hit points off of that Runesmith. However, I have to pull out quickly because Grombrindal comes screaming in. He is not happy about what's going down here. I'm going to do my best to get the damage done, but at the same time, like, even just taking some glancing blows. Look at that smoke bomb. Very nicely played by Indie Pride. This is the kind of stuff that scares me, obviously. You get close to Grombrindal for just long enough. I mean, in the game is kind of wonky. Like, he's having a really hard time landing a hit when he should definitely be landing some hits there. I think he may have got one there. Yeah, just the mechanics sometimes with the charge and the entities are collapsing and moving and all that kind of stuff is kind of weird, kind of wonky. But yeah, we'll see what happens. I finally get some of my Marauders back up here. I'm going to use a Phantasmagoria again, just to hold everything still. Dropping leadership will help against the Runesmith. It certainly won't help against the other stuff. What's funny is that it was my units that broke, even against a debuffed and locked into place Grombrindal. And I don't really blame him either. I mean, Grombrindal is pretty scary regardless of the situation. So probably a smart move on the part of my Marauders to escape with their lives. I'm just going to have to commit here. There's no other way out of this. So I've tried to get some cycle charge damage going. It's really not doing anything. Grombrindal, I've debuffed him. I'm doing my best, but it's rough. So I'm going to try and peel through him here at the end, but it just won't quite be enough. I'm going to lose my Seekers, and then I'm not going to have enough to get through the rest of this with my Herald. I will bounce around, but see, like, watch right here. There's no damage done. They kind of just plow single entity infantry, and this unit should be particularly good against the single entity infantry, but it's not. I don't know why. So a very close battle. Like I said, I expected this one to maybe be a somewhat easy victory for Slaanesh, and maybe it should be with a different pick, right? I'm very curious to hear if you all have any ideas or critique on my pick. I'm by no means an expert of any faction in this game, and certainly not Slaanesh, right? If I have the most time with the faction, it's probably like Druki or one of the others. But, it was a very fun match. Obviously, I'm going against a solid player, too. Indie Pride is quite good at the game. So, again, I say I expected it to be somewhat easy. I expected that he was playing from the disadvantage, but I think his clever pick of the blasting charges did a very good job of neutralizing a lot of that disadvantage, at least in this matchup. You can see here that I did very well with like this Seeker, the other one not so much. And if we go look at the Seeker chariots, really quite poor. They cost 800 and neither one of them even got close. I did get bogged down a couple of times, but they still bashed through a lot of infantry. They just really weren't causing the damage. So if I had to change a couple of things to readjust the strategy to this particular situation, and of course hindsight is perfect, right? I couldn't have guessed all this stuff going in, but if I find myself in another battle using a similar army, I think one of the first things I would do is change out the Furies, and I would basically just leave the Chariots, because none of them really ended up being particularly useful. Even my Exalted Seeker Chariot was not great here. So I would just reapply that spend to probably get a hold of more Seekers, keep the Furies, keep the same basic composition of units here, and then essentially come screaming in the same way, except this time, as mentioned, use the Furies to charge into the back of the frontline miners, and maybe that'll even draw out the blasting charges of the Iron Breakers and some of the other fire, right? It would draw the fire. That would allow my main line to get into position. It would also allow my Seekers, which feasibly there'd be more of them, to get around to the flank at this point. Once those units start to get around to the flank, then they have the potential, in my opinion, to do a whole lot more damage, because if the dwarves don't send anything forward to help the front line, it's going to fall between getting hit from the front and the back at the same time. If they waste all their shots into the Furies, there's going to be the Seekers coming in, basically unchallenged from the flank as well. Of course, you would have to bring some units of infantry in from the flank in order to at least bog down the Slayers. But if you could get the Slayers busy and your Seekers managed to get through, they would do much better work against the Dwarf Skirmishers than I think the Chariots would at this point. But you all can tell me what you think. I really appreciate Indie Pride. Make sure you go check out his channel if you get a chance. I'll have it linked in the description. He makes awesome content and has been for a long time, and he's been a help to my channel a great number of times as well, so I always appreciate him. HeirofCarthage signing out for now. I will see you all soon with some more action in Total War Warhammer 3 Mortal Empires.